Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to Basics of Lighting in Maya tutorial. I thought I'd start out with some basic tutorials, like really quick ones, since my last one was like 40 minutes long. So we'll get right into it. I've got a basic scene here, just with a few polygonal objects. And basically the first thing you want to do, I always render in Mental Ray, so the first thing you want to do is double check the plugin's loaded. It'll start up here. You have to scroll down to Maya to MR and just check that it's loaded, and I tick auto load because I use it a lot. So once that's sorted out, if we render right now with no lights, if we click render, we don't get any shadows. There is a default light which comes from the camera when there's no other lights in the scene, but it's pretty bad, doesn't look very nice. And of course there's no shadows, which is what we want. So if we drop in a point light up here, now this is my custom shelf, so usually you'll be starting with probably polygons, or actually the general tab will be the one that you get by default. Basically to get the lights, you can just go to the rendering tab if you don't have a custom shelf. You can check out on how to create a custom shelf in my tutorial on creating custom shelves in Maya, which I uploaded a few months ago, so just check that out. So I'll drop in a point light here first. So if we just have this in, now I'm using Maya 2014, so by default it actually activates shadows when you create a light, but in previous versions it doesn't actually, in my experience. So just double check once you've created the light in the attribute editor on the side. Just scroll down to ray trace shadow attributes and tick ray trace shadows. So basically by default it's given me these options. In older versions of Maya the ray depth limit will probably be 1, so I'll just set it to that, and shadow rays 1. So if we just leave it at default settings and we click render, as you can see we're getting some really sharp shadows, but we are getting shadowing, so it's already looking better. So what we can do now is that it doesn't really emulate real life shadows in the fact that it's really sharp. So one of the ways we can make soft shadows with ray trace is to up the light radius, and what it does is basically emulate the light being a larger object than just a point in space. So if we go say 4, now when we do this we'll also have to up the shadow rays, because otherwise this will happen, because it's only sending out one ray. It's pretty much like samples. Just stop that there. So as you can see it's all noisy and there's not really many shadows. I'll actually put that down, that's a bit high, probably about 2. I'll try, and we'll put the shadow rays, just for preview purposes, for a fast render, to 10. Obviously the more shadow rays you add, and the softer your shadow, the longer it will take to calculate in the render. So if we hit render with that, as you can see there, we're getting some really nice soft shadowing. It's a bit noisy, but for the final render we would up the shadow rays and the sampling to get a really smooth result. So that's looking nice. Now one of the things you can do to speed up rendering, if you're not looking for the most photorealistic shadows, you can untick ray trace shadows and use depth map shadows, which actually use a map feature. It doesn't actually trace, doesn't use ray tracing. So if we just hit render on the default there, it actually renders a lot faster than ray trace shadows in most circumstances. But as you can see it's quite strange. The only way you would use these shadows is either for preview purposes or if you didn't want your shadows to be accurate. As in, depth map shadows have a limitation that you can't gradually blur it out, as in the entire, because it uses a shadow map, the entire edge is going to be the same softness or sharpness depending on what you set. So it's a bit low res at the moment. If I set the resolution to 2048, and I'll just select a region. If we render that, it's going to be a bit less noisy. And the way you can smooth it out is you can add the filter. Say you could go up to filter 4. Let's render that again. As you can see, it blurs out the shadows. This is useful for some fill lights, you know, depending, but I usually like to stay away from depth map shadows. It can actually get really slow if you have a lot of depth map shadows. I usually just use ray trace. So that's the basics of shadowing in Maya, the absolute basics. I will probably do some more tutorials on this with different lights, different types of lights, different scenes, and different ways to get the image you want. Alright, so thanks for watching, and don't forget to check out my other videos on YouTube, and also check out incandescentimaging.net. Thanks, see ya.